It looks like we're getting a massive third expansion for Valhalla. The rumors we discussed before might have been put on hold in favor of more Valhalla content. There's really a ton to go over. I will tell you everything you need to know, and we'll of course speculate as well what it all means, looking at recent Ubisoft trends and way more. So if you like that, then a like on the video would of course really help me out. And let's go. We start with a tweet from French YouTuber Jonathan. You likely know him at this point, right? I will share a link to his channel in the video description. In a previous video, we went over interesting details about the Druids DLC he discovered after digging through the files, like an achievement, hinting at the sickle swords coming back, and way more. Well, now he discovered a reference to a third DLC expansion. So we got Ireland, the Druids DLC, Francia, so Siege of Paris, and DLC Expansion 3, Meteor. Yes, those things falling out of the sky as highlighted in a previous video. Cam was of course kind enough to share footage with me of her riding around and then a meteor dropping on the ground. In a later video I talked about more instances of people finding those meteors and actually making a resource farm out of it, because if you walk up to the meteor you actually get some tungsten, titanium and iron ore. This person could then just ride away, turn around, and then a new meteor would spawn on the exact same location and do this over and over again. So yeah, likely not intentional, right? We also learned that these meteors were already in the game since launch, thanks to another video posted around the release. But yeah, it seems to be just coincidence. Like, sure, there could be a connection, but I don't know what it would be. Like, I'm still curious why these meteors are in the game, but this is likely just an internal code name for the project inside Ubisoft Sofia. I namely asked a Spanish YouTuber Rafiti, who of course revealed some information about Valhalla before the launch that turned out to be true, if he thinks that this is Sofia making this potential third expansion. And he says yes. And this makes sense on multiple levels, one being in terms of the code name. You might remember that the rogue code name was Comet internally, so makes sense that they would call their next big project Meteor, right? And let's go back to Rafiti, because it looks like he knows more about this third potential DLC. And again, he for example noted that there would be no co-op in Valhalla, that there would be a settlement, and way more. And now he says the following, and you will see a Twitter translated tweet here. So he says that the supposedly DLC 3 was found in the files with codename Meteor, and that this is the 2022 content for Assassin's Creed we will get. It's not a full game, but a DLC or spin-off like Far Cry New Dawn. He then continues that Meteor might be a DLC, but it will be much bigger than seen in Irish and the Paris expansions. And those expansions, part of the season pass, of course already look massive. And Ubisoft has been doing this for some time actually. A year and a few months after the launch of Far Cry 4, we got Far Cry Primal, a $40 premium game that later turned out to have used the same map as Far Cry 4. Far Cry 5 followed the same trend with New Dawn, only this time they were upfront about using the same world, because it was basically a sequel to Far Cry 5. And they only worked on this for like a year and a few months, which was kind of crazy. So it was also $40 and reused a ton of the assets from Far Cry 5. And I'm expecting something similar for this third expansion. So really just a continuation of Valhalla, obviously in a new world, but more on what I think it will be in a second. We are also of course in this weird in-between moment where the PlayStation 5 and Series X are already out, but still most people are playing on PS4 and Xbox One. So I also think that with this sort of third expansion, they can make sure that they have one more Assassin's Creed game coming to Xbox One and PS4 before making the jump to a full next-gen game in 2023 or maybe later. And Ubisoft Sofia is the perfect studio for this. They did the exact same thing with Rogue, that of course built on the foundation of Black Flag and made sure that people on PS3 and 360 could still play a new AC game, while Unity was next-gen only. Ubisoft Sofia, by the way, also made Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation for the Vita, which was also kind of a spin-off of Assassin's Creed 3 with a lot of similar elements. So I would not be surprised if Meteor is something like that as well. The Division 2's Warlords of New York expansion is another great example of a Ubisoft paid expansion for an already released game. Like, that had way more content than the usual DLCs part of the Season Pass, and this expansion also did really well for Ubisoft. So I would not be surprised if Meteor was similar in size, but I'm not entirely sure if we will play Eivor again. I mean, it would be obvious if it's like a Valhalla DLC, but I'm also not sure if Ubisoft wants to eliminate a lot of newcomers by making it a continuation of Eivor's story. Because then, people who did not finish Valhalla or never picked the game up would not care to begin with, right? So I would not be surprised if we saw a new character instead, maybe with some sort of progression carrying over from Valhalla, like gear earns would be nice, for example. The thing is namely that DLC expansions don't typically sell that well. People play the game at launch and then a more hardcore group stays around for the post-launch content. And we really see that in this tweet from Daniel Ahmed in September 2019. He took a picture of the amount of players for the Curse of the Pharaohs and the Hidden Ones DLC during a Ubisoft presentation. So this was a year and a half after the release of those expansions. Here it was mentioned that the Curse of the Pharaohs was played by 1.5 million people, while the Hidden Ones DLC by 1.2 million people. We later learned that Origins and a lot of other Ubisoft games sold more than 10 million units. So roughly 1 out of 10 people played these DLCs. That's not a lot. And by the point this potential third DLC hits, we already had the Wrath of the Druids and the Siege of Paris. So I would not be surprised if they're going for a more standalone approach, so even people who did not play Valhalla can still jump in without having a feeling that they missed anything. Access the Animus in their video, of course link to that in the video description as well, made a great connection with Rogue, saying that the Order medallions we collect in Valhalla have the Yggdrasil tree that we also see on Shay from Rogue. And it's the same developer, so maybe it is connected somehow. But there's another one big thing missing from the post-launch of Valhalla right now, and that is a full-on mythical expansion. And again, going back to these numbers, the mythical expansion was way more popular than the Hidden Ones DLC. With Odyssey, we of course saw the Fate of Atlantis going full mythology, and in Origins we had the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC. And who was the lead team behind the Curse of the Pharaohs? Ubisoft Sofia. So maybe they're doing something similar again for Valhalla, but now on a way bigger scale. Like sure, we already have Asgard and Jotunheim in the main game, but it's also a missed opportunity if Ubisoft did not touch on more realms from the Norse mythology before moving on to the next game. And the Codex on Twitter shared early exploration concept art for Valhalla from Martin, who now works at 343, working on Halo by the way. Doesn't mean that his work won't be used though. Like, it shows that Ubisoft was actually already keen to explore more realms for Valhalla. And this kind of reminds me of this tweet from January 2019, way before the Fate of Atlantis DLC was released. We saw concept art of Cerberus, who of course later showed up in the second expansion. So it could totally be that mythical realms are the setting for this new DLC. But what about that Richard Lionheart project though? Jonathan already teased a while back as a potential smaller AC game after Valhalla. Well, he now followed up saying that the project did exist, but that when he got the info, the game was only in pre-production, so had not even started. He then continues that COVID of course had a huge role, and we of course see that already with other Ubisoft games. Like Far Cry 6 was supposed to be out in February, it's now April, and we still only have the cinematic trailer, no gameplay, and no info in like months. So Jonathan notes that this project about Lionheart was put on hold to focus on this third DLC instead, developed by the same team, so Ubisoft Sofia. Another reason, according to Jonathan, that Ubisoft decided to make this DLC was because of the success of Valhalla. As you likely know, it was the most successful Assassin's Creed launch in terms of money made ever. Rafiti, by the way, also chimes in, saying that we would be surprised regarding those Crusades and Templar rumors. He might tell us one day, but that Meteor is not that. It will be almost 100% like Valhalla. After all, it's like a DLC. The AC that changes things will not arrive for a few years. So to recap, we have big Valhalla DLC in 2021, with of course free content coming as well. Then a major expansion, maybe a standalone Valhalla type experience in 2022. and then we get a new game in 2023, maybe later because of COVID. Like, that would then be made by the Valhalla team, if I had to bet, who's already working on a next game. So yeah, interesting stuff. Let me of course know what you think in the comments down below. Really curious to hear your take. I will of course like cover this way more when we get new info. We'll be keeping an eye out. But let's focus on the more imminent Valhalla content for now. Like, totally subscribe for way more info regarding the Druids DLC and also way more other content coming to the game. A like on the video would really help me out. And totally check out my Assassin's Creed podcast this week with Joyce, where we go even more in depth on these rumors. And you can find a link to the podcast, the audio version, in the pinned comment. I also always put a video up each week for members of the channel. You can watch that by clicking on the screen. It's available for $2 per month. Every week a new episode. For now, I will speak to you next time, and goodbye.